with Kevin Colbert, man, he was talking about a lot, man. But more importantly, he was talking about, the wide receiver room in terms of Deontay Johnson, in terms of JuJu Smith-Schuster. Now, with both of those guys, it was a little bit different in the tone, right? With Deontay, they were asking, hey, man, have you already considered the extension? Have y'all already started the talks? And he said, nah, we don't do that. Typically, we address restricted, unrestricted guys. Then we go free agency, then the draft. Then after that is when we will go and decide if we want to have that conversation. But he said there's no guarantee that they're going to do that. And it really had me thinking in a sense like, man, I wonder why he wasn't so, gung-ho that, yeah, they're going to try to get this deal done. But then before we even deep dive into that even more, he also was talking about JuJu in the sense that, man, he applauded JuJu being able to work his way back from the injury that he sustained last season and come up in the playoffs. And then it had me thinking like, man, is the door open for a potential JuJu return? Because that's kind of how I felt. He was like, yo, he's still a young player.
I think it's always open.
I agree, right? He was like, he's a young player in all these
team
teams.
For 5 years. He's always welcome back.
I was like, man, wait.
There's always talks about JuJu coming back to Pittsburgh.
I was like, okay, all right. So we'll start with JuJu because I don't think this one is as nuanced as the Deontay conversation. But with JuJu, I mean, is he a better option than some of the potential guys we could draft or, try to go out there and acquire in free agency? Because obviously we're talking about us needing to improve our wide receiver room in some capacity, whether we're talking bringing in a higher end talent or just more depth, right? A true slot receiver, however we want to view that.
Yeah.
But like you said, JuJu has been in-house. Is JuJu the best option for that? Or does it make sense to go out there and find somebody in free agency, like how we talked about a Cole Beasley the other day? Or does it make sense to draft a guy like we talked about a Sky Moore potentially versus,
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's kind of like where I'm at with that.
Maybe
thing
both.
Right now with JuJu, right?
Maybe it's both because that has to do with a little bit with the Deontay Johnson conversation because maybe you draft Sky Moore, you bring back JuJu, but then you don't give Deontay that extension.
Ooh.
And then you have JuJu, Sky Moore. Maybe Sky Moore develops into a little more of that outside threat that we were talking about when we were doing the breakdown, and then you also have Claypool.
Absolutely.
Maybe you do that because we've done that many times before. You draft a receiver in the second or third round, and we don't really need him.
You might be onto something low key. I didn't think of that element right there in terms of bringing back JuJu, still draft the Sky Moore more so being the replacement for Deontay, no extension for him. That's a different element. I like that though because, I mean, it could work. It definitely could work.
Man. Yeah, and I think you could be seeing Sky Moore out on the field this year too. Yeah. It's not like
no, absolutely.
We have to. Although, you don't draft him in the third round. At least in the same season, you draft him in the third round. And then give him the James Washington treatment. I wouldn't think so.
No, not at all. He's going to play. Yeah, he would definitely play.
I don't know what happened with James Washington. I thought we liked him. I mean, we drafted him in the second round and everything, but I don't know.
I don't know, bro. Yeah, I don't know. That was such a weird dynamic, man, all year long. I'm just like, what is the disconnect? So,
last two seasons, even 2020 was weird. Like he would have a game or two. I remember Washington game. 2 nice catches, 50 yards, the touchdown. Yep. Even the Ravens game, he had that clutch catch at the end of the game where Ben was like, man, James Washington's the only guy I trust in this scenario. He comes down with it. He's got the strong hands. But then we really didn't see him that consistently in other moments.
Yeah. And we never heard Ben really bang the table for him either to say, hey, I want this guy out there even more. So it's like, man, like I just don't know, what that situation is about or was about, man. But I definitely don't see James returning. To me, it just does not make any sense for him to come back. But with JuJu,
for his standpoint, at least,
right. But with JuJu, my biggest, I guess, question is, if we go that route of bringing him back and drafting a receiver and not extending Deontay, what does the JuJu contract look like? Because I still feel like he's going to want an increase in pay. But I don't necessarily know.
He got 8.
Right. So I'm like, an increase, you're talking about 9 or double digits. I don't want to pay him that. I don't think that he's worth that right now. Not saying that he couldn't go and revitalize his career and show that he's worth double digits, but to me in Pittsburgh, he's not there right now. Not when you have a Deontay in the chase.
Yeah, what's the reason for the increase in pay then? Just because the cap space is getting a little bigger this offseason?
Yeah. And if you're trying to get the homegrown deal, you're like, hey man, I came back while I was hurt. I put it all on the line for y'all. I've never been a headache, and even when I was, I stopped being a headache. Like, he could go that route, but I'm just like, I don't think he's worth that right now.
No, oh no. So I did look at some of the other receivers that we could be looking at.
Mm-hmm.
AJ Green.
Okay.
$7 million.
Okay.
T.Y. Hilton, 6.
Okay.
DJ Chark's at like the 12 range. Will Fuller, I'm assuming, is around 8, 9, 10.
Mm-hmm.
Sammy Watkins, 5.
See,
what's JuJu right there? And would you rather have JuJu than some of those guys that I mentioned in AJ Green, T.Y. and Sammy?
See, for me, T.Y. and DJ Chark were the two that stood out to me the most. T.Y. because he can definitely take the top off the defense. He's a guy that is a big play threat. But
or is he just washed though? That's the question.
But I don't think he's washed. But the problem is this with with T.Y., with AJ Green, with Sammy Watkins, all three of those guys. Well, definitely two of those guys, in terms of AJ and T.Y., they've been banged up a lot. They've missed a lot of football these past couple of years. Now, granted, when they're available, they play at a high level. But
yeah, AJ didn't play bad last year,
right? But
800 yards, you would take that.
But my thing is, they missed time. With Sammy, I think that he is really dependent upon the quarterback. I look at him when he was in Buffalo, when he didn't have a Patrick Mahomes. You look at him when he was with Patrick Mahomes, and then you look at him when he did not have Patrick Mahomes. And obviously with Baltimore, they were going through some stuff when Lamar went down. His productivity just, it wasn't the same. And right now, our biggest question mark really is at quarterback. We don't know what we're getting out of there right now. We don't know how good this player is going to be, whether it's Mason Haskins or a draft pick or somebody in free agency. So I don't want to bring in a Sammy Watkins, knowing that he is too dependent on that. Whereas I think DJ is just a little bit more well-rounded. A DJ is more, it is not going to be as dependent on the quarterback. He's a guy that can make the quarterback's life easier in a sense. And that's also
Chark's legit.
Right, and that's what I'm trying to say. I'm like, man, what can we do to make whoever is our quarterback next year that has the easiest time with this thing? Give him more talent. Guys that, hey, you don't always have to have that ball pinpoint accurate, because we know right now with Mason and Haskins, we don't know that they're going to be able to give us pinpoint accuracy every time, perfect ball placement every time. So you want guys that can go out there and get that ball wherever it's at in the vicinity. And I think with DJ, he gives you a lot more of that than those other guys, and more than JuJu right now in terms of just athletic ability. But that's also why he's going to cost a little bit more as well. Yeah.
Because he's looking around $12 million.
Right.
The AJ Green, T.Y. Hilton, they're saying 7.6 in terms of market value. Spot Rack didn't have JuJu's, but I would assume you're saying a little bit. He was going to want a little bit more. I don't know if that's going to be his market. I would assume he's in the market. AJ Green, T.Y. Hilton of 7.6.
I would agree, but he's going to be looking for more, just because that's how we're wired as players. Like, that's how the market goes. Whatever you just signed, you always want to bump it up. You always want more the next go around. So that's the only reason why I'm saying that. But I don't think his market is going to reflect that, because the play has it, and he's coming off of a year where he missed a lot of time due to injury.
So that's the question.
Yeah.
Do you take JuJu over maybe some of those guys that I mentioned? We'll say DJ Chark and Will Fuller aside, just because I would take them over JuJu in a vacuum any day, but they're going to cost a little higher.
Right.
So what about like those guys in his range? You would take him over JuJu.
Yeah, I would. I like T.Y. a lot, man. AJ, I would really have to evaluate his health, man. Like, that's the big one for me with him, because obviously he has the size, the speed, and we know he's a proven commodity. But if he's not going to be available because of health, well, then, it's like, man, I don't want to be paying him $7 million to just be rehabbing. Like, that's my other thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
How about this name? A little flyer. This is a great call. I hope we do this. Rashard Perryman.
High-end talent. Yeah.
I don't know what his deal is. Why does he keep bouncing from team to team, getting cut? Because I swear he's good.
He's good, and he's very talented, and he's a high pedigree guy. I don't know. It could be, maybe he doesn't mesh well. Maybe he doesn't work well with others. I don't know. I haven't really looked into what has been the biggest issue with him just yet. But yeah, he's very intriguing. I think he's kind of worth a flyer. No different than, when the Chiefs took the flyer on Sammy Watkins. It was like, man, this guy is talented. This guy's a high pedigree guy, but he's been inconsistent. He hasn't really lived up to it. But they took the chance, and it fit, and it worked for that year or whatever, right? So it's like similar concept to me when I think of Rashard. I'm like, man, I don't know, but right now you could get him for the cheap. I think it's a super low deal. And then
he came back to the Bucs last year for $1 million. So you could get him for $1 million or $2 million.
Right, like you bringing in that type of talent. Like I said, I just don't know if it's a personality thing, if it's a he's a bad guy in the locker room. I just don't know these things about him just yet. So that's why I'd have to look into more of why he hasn't really been able to stick with any team. Because the productivity. I mean, when he's on, he looks like a good player.
Yeah, when he gets targeted, because there was one season with the Bucks.
Mm-hmm.
Evans went down, Godwin went down. He became like their wide receiver 2 or 3 and was targeted a lot by Jameis. And he actually became like a fantasy sleeper that year.
Saying. He was definitely productive, man.